When winter hits us today, we turn up the thermostat, complain about the heating bill, and order food directly to our door. But tens of thousands of years ago, a severe winter wasn't an inconvenience. It was a calculated purge by nature. When the temperature plummeted below zero and stayed there for months, ancient humans faced a brutal mathematical reality: change instantly or become fossils. Imagine the sun setting in November and the warmth not returning until May. Outside, the rivers have turned to solid stone, the animals have fled south, and the air itself feels like shards of glass in your lungs. You have no insulated walls, no thermal blankets, and your fire is dying. What do you do when the world freezes for months and there is nowhere left to run? For ancient humans, the onset of a prehistoric deep freeze wasn't a gradual dusting of snow. It was a hostile, systemic shutdown of their entire universe. The plant life that provided predictable foraging withered into frozen dust within weeks. The massive megafauna, the mammoth herds and reindeer that ancient humans relied on for meat, immediately began migrating south, moving faster than a human tribe burdened with children and elders could ever follow. This triggered what evolutionary anthropologists call the Great Retreat. The open savannas and forests became exposed death traps, swept by winds capable of causing hypothermia in minutes. Ancient humans were forced deep into the earth. The cave wasn't a cozy sanctuary. It was a desperate, claustrophobic compromise. Entering a cave meant trading the danger of freezing to death for a completely new psychological nightmare. Inside, the darkness was absolute. The ancient human brain, evolved for the vibrant visual stimuli of the outdoors, was suddenly plunged into a sensory vacuum. For months at a time, a group of 20 to 30 ancient humans had to occupy a space no larger than a modern two-bedroom apartment. The air grew thick with the smell of smoke, damp earth, and unwashed bodies. Every cough, every sigh, and every whispered word echoed off the stone walls. This forced proximity created an intense pressure cooker of human emotion, forcing our ancestors to develop radical social rules just to keep from tearing each other apart. As the weeks bled into months, the survival equation narrowed down to two non-negotiable elements: fire and fat. Keeping a fire burning for 90 days straight in the dead of winter is a monumental logistical challenge. You cannot simply walk outside and gather dry twigs when the landscape is buried under 10 feet of packed ice. Wood becomes saturated with frozen moisture, making it nearly impossible to ignite without exploding the wood fibers or choking the cave with toxic, blinding smoke. Tribes had to assign dedicated firekeepers, individuals whose sole life or death responsibility was to nurse a single bed of embers, ensuring it never went out. If the fire died in the middle of a January blizzard, the tribe died with it. No pressure, right? Just the survival of your entire genetic lineage resting on a pile of glowing ash while you try not to doze off. But fire only solved the external cold. The internal threat was starvation, and the physics of prehistoric starvation are deeply counterintuitive. If an ancient hunter managed to kill a lean winter animal like a starving deer, eating that meat exclusively could actually kill them. This is a medical phenomenon known as protein poisoning or rabbit starvation. The ancient human liver cannot safely process a diet consisting entirely of lean protein without fats or carbohydrates. Doing so leads to severe metabolic damage, diarrhea, and ultimately death. Basically nature's cruelest winter joke, eating a giant steak, but still technically starving to death because it lacked grease. To survive the freeze, ancient humans didn't just need food, they desperately needed fat. Fat was the ultimate currency of the Ice Age. It provided the dense caloric load required to keep the ancient human brain functioning and the body's internal furnace burning at sub-zero temperatures. This reality forced hunters into high-stakes, terrifying gambles. They had to track the few remaining megafauna, dangerous apex predators or giant beasts, not for the meat, but specifically to harvest the thick layers of fat insulating their bodies. Every hunting expedition into the snow was a literal coin flip with death. Yet, it was during these grueling months of isolation and darkness that something extraordinary happened to human consciousness. The winter forced the birth of the modern mind. When you are trapped in a cave for months with nothing but the flickering shadows of a fire, the ancient human brain seeks an escape from the suffocating reality. It turns inward. Though, let's be honest, after month 2 of staring at the same rock wall and listening to the exact same uncle clear his throat, inventing abstract art was probably the only thing keeping them from a full-blown existential crisis. Anthropologists believe that the long frozen winters accelerated the development of complex language and storytelling. Before the deep freeze, communication among ancient humans was highly tactical, focused on the hunt, danger, and immediate needs. But inside the winter cave, language became symbolic. Ancient humans began to invent mythologies, spinning elaborate tales about the spirits of the wind, the animals they hunted, and the ancestors who had gone before them. This is also the era where we see the explosion of magnificent cave art. Deep within the darkest, most inaccessible chambers of caves, places where the light of the fire barely reached, ancient humans painted vivid, breathing images of horses, bisons, and mammoths. These weren't casual decorations or prehistoric doodles to pass the time. They were deeply psychological coping mechanisms, powerful rituals designed to project control over a terrifying, unpredictable world outside. By painting the animals they desperately needed to return in the spring, ancient humans gave themselves the psychological fortitude to endure the long dark. But we cannot romanticize the Ice Age winter. The survival of our species came at a devastating cost, marked by silent casualties and agonizing moral choices. When the wood supply ran low and the cached fat began to spoil or run out, the tribe faced grim mathematical triage. Calories had to be strictly rationed, and those rations were prioritized for the individuals who could ensure the group's immediate survival, the active hunters and the women of childbearing age. The very young and the elderly bore the brunt of the winter's cruelty. Infant mortality skyrocketed during the deep freeze, as nursing mothers, deprived of proper nutrition, struggled to produce milk. The elderly, recognizing they were a net drain on the tribe's dwindling resources, often made the ultimate sacrifice, stepping out into the freezing darkness so their grandchildren might live to see the spring. When the ground is frozen solid as granite, you cannot bury your dead. The bodies of loved ones who perished during the winter had to be placed in deep crevices at the back of the cave, covered with heavy stones to keep scavengers away, or left out in the snow far from the camp. The collective grief suffered by ancient humans during these months left an indelible mark on the human psyche, encoding a profound sense of resilience, trauma, and communal codependency into our very genetic makeup. When the ice finally cracked in May and the first green shoots broke through the thawing mud, the ancient humans who emerged from those caves were fundamentally different biological and psychological creatures than the ones who had entered them in November. They had conquered the absolute worst that the planet could throw at them, not through brute physical strength but through cognitive adaptability, social cohesion, and sheer willpower. The legacy of those endless prehistoric winters lives on inside you today. When the days grow shorter in November and you feel a sudden, unexplainable drop in your energy, a desire to stay indoors, wrap yourself in warmth, and seek comfort food, you aren't just experiencing random seasonal blues, you are feeling the ancient evolutionary echoes of the Great Retreat. Your brain is reacting to the exact same environmental cues that once told your ancestors it was time to retreat into the cave, guard the fire, and prepare to endure the long dark. We are quite literally the children of the survivors who refused to freeze.